A second witness against the Book of Mormon is the husband and wife team of Gerald and Sandra Tanner. In discussing the topic of textual changes, they write as follows. Another important change was made in Mosiah 21:28. In this verse, the name of the king has been changed from Benjamin to Mosiah. In the 1830 edition of the Book of Mormon, we read as follows. King Benjamin, notice the all caps, bold print, underlined. King Benjamin had a gift from God whereby he could interpret such engravings. Book of Mormon 1830 edition, page 200. In modern editions, the Tanners say, of the Book of Mormon, this verse has been changed to read, King Mosiah had a gift from God whereby he could interpret such engravings. It would appear from the chronology found in the Book of Mormon, this is the Tanners talking, King Benjamin should have been dead at this time, and therefore the Mormon church leaders evidently felt that it was best to change the king's name to Mosiah. Alright, now the Tanners then go on to summarize some of the published comments on this issue by Sidney Sperry, which comments I will examine momentarily. In their comments cited above, however, it is easy to see that the Tanners did a smidgen more analysis than had Walter Martin, and that the Tanners brought up the idea that, based on their understanding of Book of Mormon chronology, Benjamin should have been deceased at the time Mosiah 21 verse 28 was written. However, in terms of an in-depth, penetrating, or thoughtful analysis on this matter, we find none coming from the Tanners. Okay. No, so we turn now to John Weldon, who co-authored a highly polemical book that also has televangelist John Ankerberg's name prominently displayed. Now, Weldon boasted of holding several advanced degrees, including 2 doctorates, so presumably we'd be looking at a publication of seasoned scholarship. Well, I hate to disappoint you, but here's what we get from John Weldon. As we have seen, he says, Mormons who admit to the Book of Mormon changes may claim that they are grammatical only, and that the basic meaning of the text has never been changed. This is also false. For example, the 1830 edition of Mosiah 21:28 refers to King Benjamin, while modern editions read King Mosiah. According to Mormon chronology, Benjamin was dead and so no longer king at this point. So the divinely inspired name was changed to King Mosiah to cover the error in italics. So for Dr. Weldon, we get the impression that Mormons, as a general rule, do not admit to textual changes in the Book of Mormon, but when they do, they will only admit to grammatical changes that do not change the basic meaning of the text. Along with that straw man, there was the subtle notion that there was some sort of a conspiracy, some vast cover-up operation at work here. Again, apart from making the same comment about chronology that the Tanners make, along with the exact same scriptural references, now Weldon offers no substantive analysis. He was content to take his few pot shots and move on to other targets. Finally, let me share the spunk and fervor of James White of Alpha and Omega Ministries. In the first of several publications attacking the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, White wrote a book comprised of fictitious letters that he wrote to a fictional full-time LDS missionary about White's very real angst over LDS truth claims. Here's what he says. Changes of an historical nature have been made as well. Seemingly, Joseph became confused as to which king was which and who was supposed to be alive at what time while dictating the Book of Mosiah. On page 200 of the 1830 Book of Mormon, we read, And now, Lehi was again filled with joy on learning from the mouth of Ammon that King Benjamin had a gift from God whereby he could interpret such engravings. Yea, and Ammon did also rejoice. White goes on to say, this passage is to be found in the modern edition of Mosiah chapter 21. The problem is fairly obvious, for Mosiah 6 verse 5 reads, And King Benjamin lived 3 years and he died. 15 chapters later, however, he is alive and well in the 1830 Book of Mormon. The modern edition reads, And now Lehi was again filled with joy on learning from the mouth of Ammon that King Mosiah had a gift from God, whereby he can interpret such engravings. Yea, and Ammon also did rejoice. White goes on to taunt his fictitious correspondent by asking, well, who had this gift, Elder Hahn? Was it Benjamin or Mosiah? But once again, we see that slightly more thought, but only slightly more, put into the issue before us. White has tried to shape the problem with a little more detail, by delineating the number of chapters that separate the account of Benjamin's death and the passage in Mosiah 21. But here, he has unwittingly demonstrated a lack of competence concerning the very nature of the record he's criticizing. Quite simply, James White, like his fellow critics, betrays no real understanding of the issues he is busy attacking. Now, before I delve into just what those issues are, it would perhaps be appropriate to survey our own apologetic history and assess who has published information on this question from the LDS camp. I think it's also important to assess just how well our own scholars have handled the issues involved with Mosiah 21:28. Now, I know of only 4 previously published attempts by LDS writers, thinkers, or educators. Maybe more than that, but I'm only aware of 4. And the earliest of these would be Sidney Sperry, who taught at BYU from 1932 until his retirement in 1971. In pondering this textual change, Dr. Sperry wrote as follows. Was it an inadvertent slip of the tongue on the part of Joseph Smith as he dictated his translation to Oliver Cowdery, or did he translate correctly enough an original error on the part of Mormon, the abridger of the Book of Mormon? The last of these suggestions is probably the correct one, for the fact remains that the reading King Benjamin is an out-and-out error because the king had been dead for some time. So in this rather brief comment, Dr. Sperry attributes the anomaly to an error of some sort, either on the part of Joseph Smith or more likely on the part of Mormon as editor. Sperry shares the assumptions held by the Tanners and some of the other critics that Benjamin would have been dead for some time when Mosiah 21:28 was written. Short of that, there does not seem to be much in the way of analysis. Now, Hugh Nibley took a different approach when he made passing reference to the issue as it is found in Ether 4, verse 1, although his comments would apply just as well to the passage in Mosiah 21:28. In his 1967 book, Since Cumorah, Nibley was running through a quick survey of some of the textual changes in the Book of Mormon. And the portion that concerns us reads as follows. Sometimes, Nibley says, the editors of later editions of the Book of Mormon have made corrections, quote unquote, that were better left unmade. Was it necessary to change the name of Benjamin in the first edition to Mosiah in later editions of Ether 4, verse 1? Probably not. For though it is certain that Mosiah kept the records in question, it is by no means certain that his father Benjamin did not also have a share in keeping them. It was Benjamin who displayed the zeal of a lifelong book lover in the keeping and studying of the records. And after he handed over the throne to his son Mosiah, he lived on and may well have spent many days among his beloved records. And among these records could have been the Jaredite plates, which were brought to Zarahemla early in the reign of Mosiah, when his father could still have been living. Now, with all due respect to Dr. Nibley, this assessment, while largely sound, could stand some tidying up in places. First, to his credit, Dr. Nibley answers his own question of the necessity of the textual change with a rather tentative, probably not. Note that Nibley didn't say, absolutely not. Probably not is an appropriately cautious phrase, for it denotes a leaning, a likelihood, not a certainty. For the record, while I would share Nibley's use of the phrase, probably not, as it applies to the passage in Mosiah 21:28, I do not share his use of the term as it applies to the passage in Ether 4, verse 1, for reasons I'll get to later. Nibley is also correct in noting that Mosiah was not the only record keeper, an appropriate and accurate statement relative to Ether 4, verse 1, since it is record keeping that is the topic under discussion in Ether 4. However, although Nibley wasn't discussing Mosiah 21:28 per se, I must hasten to point out that record keeping is not the subject matter in the Mosiah passage. Instead, the topic involves record translating abilities. Here, Nibley's comments would be just as accurate were they applied to the Mosiah passage, for we have every reason to believe that both Benjamin and Mosiah were in possession of the gift of translating ancient documents. I suppose my largest misgivings concerning Nibley's statement, where he says up there that among these records possessed by Benjamin could have been the Jaredite plates. True, they could have been. Yet I consider this unlikely, given that Benjamin died somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 years following Mosiah's coronation, possibly as early as 122 BC, but more likely 121 BC, and certainly no later than 120 BC. The Jaredite records probably came into Mosiah's